What makes a great Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project? The Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project is a great project to look at if you want to see what makes a great project. The project was completed in 1908 and it was the first railway line built by a European company in the Ottoman Empire. The railway line, with its headquarters in Baghdad, connected Turkey and Iraq with an extension to the Persian Gulf. This is important because it allowed for goods and people to be transported over land all the way from Europe to Asia. It allowed for cultural exchange between Europe, Asia, and Africa, as well as connecting different religious groups like Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Armenians together. The first railway in the Ottoman Empire was built in 1856 and ran from Constantinople to Baghdad. The Ottoman Empire had established a special department by the name of the Ministry of Public Works and Transport in 1854, which was led by Mahmud Pasha. As well as the railways, this department expanded to include other branches like roads and canals. What was planned for the Constantinople-Baghdad Railway? The Ottoman Empire wanted to build a railway that connected Baghdad to Constantinople. The idea was to connect the two cities with a railway and establish it as an alternative route for trade and communication between Europe and the East. The railway was supposed to be built in order to replace the old caravan routes, which were too long, unsafe, expensive, and unreliable. The construction of this railway line started in 1881, but it wasn't completed until 1890 because of financial problems. The Ottoman Empire had financial difficulties because they had spent all their money on wars they fought in Europe. The Ottoman Empire was very focused on the building of this railway. The Sultan financed the construction with his own money, and workers from all over Asia and Europe came to build it. The number of people working on this project reached 8,000 at its peak. People from all around the world were employed to work for the railway company. They mainly worked in teams of 20 or 100 people. These teams built bridges, cut through rocky terrain, and cleaned up villages that were left abandoned by people who had moved to the area to work on the railways. The construction of the railway was an important moment in history because it contributed to infrastructure development in the countries it passed through. The Ottoman Empire wanted this railway line be called the Iron Road. At the time when it was built, the rail had a significant impact on land use and settlement patterns across Europe. On the one hand, land that could not be farmed or used because of its steep terrain was now made accessible by rail. On the other, new settlements were established along the tracks to take advantage of this new means of transportation. The railway was completed in 1870. The first railway line built by the Ottoman Empire was between Constantinople and Smyrna, which was completed in 1856. In the late 1800s, a debate about building a railway from Istanbul to Edirne, Adrianople, arose, with each side of the debate arguing for their city's benefits. The Ottomans wanted it built further south to connect to the Greek rail system, while Edirne wanted it built further north to have a direct connection to Central Europe. The Ottoman Empire was not able to complete the railway until after its decline in the early 1900s. The railroad proved vital for European industry and trade during this time period. Railways are not an effective way to transport goods across continents. Railways were not originally designed for passenger transportation. Who built and engineered the train for Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project? The train for Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project was built in the late 1800s by the British. The British were the ones who built and engineered the train for Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project. This was a huge engineering and construction project that required a lot of capital investment. The British were also responsible for building some of the most iconic structures in Baghdad, Iraq, such as the Citadel, the Alhambra Palace, and the Royal Palace. The train for Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project traveled by using 18 engineer cars. The train for Constantinople-Baghdad Railway project was an important part of the British Empire, and it benefited a lot of people in Baghdad and other places. They brought a lot of inventions that improved life quality, such as railways and steam engines. The British also brought trade, education, and technology that helped people across Iraq stay healthy. The Ottoman Empire collapsed during World War I. Iraq had been a part of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years since 1533 AD, and the Ottomans ruled over all of Western Asia Minor. The British occupied Iraq in 1917 to 1920, which resulted in the British Empire's control over Iraq. The British military and colonial rule increased the role of Arabs in the economy, especially with their involvement in agriculture and trade. The British also brought a sense of order to Iraq and improved infrastructure, such as railways. However, they contributed to the rise of Arab nationalism because they were seen as an oppressor of natives by Arabs during the British occupation. However, the British involvement in Iraq continued until 1932, when they left the country and the Iraqi monarchy was restored by King Faisal ibn Hussein. The U.S. government is trying to rebuild the Iraqi economy with the goal of eliminating Iraq's dependence on oil. Iraq's three main issues are economic development, national unity, and reducing corruption. Iraqi oil. In April 2011, the official price of a barrel of Iraqi crude oil was $93.34, $95.12. The U.S. military took control over Iraq's oil throughout the course of its occupation. As part of this control, Americans set prices as well as profits for Iraqi oil companies to receive from their production. The U.S. State Department imposed sanctions on Iraq in 1990, preventing the country from exporting oil. Iraq needs $45 billion of capital to meet its energy demands and to invest in infrastructure projects such as power production and transportation. Currently, Iraq's foreign reserves are at $65 billion, but it takes about 4 years for them to double due to lack of investments. Demand for oil and pressure on the price of oil was raised by three major factors. One factor was that many countries are reconsidering their reliance on oil, while some see it as a waste of resources. Two other factors include the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the drop in global demand for OPEC-controlled crude in the past 5 years. In late 2002, OPEC agreed to a production cut of 5.3 million barrels per day, reducing its output to 27.6 million barrels per day. The price of oil increased from $10 in 2003 to as high as $140 in 2008, while during the same period the price of Iraq's average barrel dropped from 70 to 60 centimes. Thank you for the secrets of the agreement to build the Constantinople-Baghdad Railway, and don't forget to subscribe, please.